Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Delighted to be joined by the International Development Secretary, Priti Patel, and it's a great pleasure having you a year on from that great
Good morning.
vote. Lovely to see you. You were very much at the forefront of the Leave campaign. We've seen, I think, a change in the makeup of Parliament where it's quite clear to me at least that there are fewer MPs looking for a kind of hard rupture from the EU, and then public opinion has also seemed to be shifting towards less of a rupture with the EU. First of all, any regrets about your campaign and the way that you campaigned all that year ago? Are you happy with where we are?
Well, to be fair, yes, Robert, you've said I campaigned to leave the European Union, and I was very pleased to be part of that campaign because, quite frankly, you know, along with many of the members of the British public that voted to leave, we were clear that we wanted to, you know, take back control of our borders, immigration, and really stand tall in the world again and be very positive about our future outside of the European Union. And of course, a year later, that's now the focus of government. When you look at the fact that on Monday last week, the Brexit negotiations started, we've been pretty clear from day one. Prime Minister Theresa May has been very clear, in fact unequivocal, that she is there to get a good deal for Britain, and that is our focus. So I don't think this is about regrets at all. I'm an optimist. I've always been positive about Britain standing tall in the world, that we'll continue to have a special and deep relationship with our partners in the European Union, but we are leaving to leave the EU, and that is exactly what that vote was about last year.
The economy is slowing down. Most economists say that's related to a fall in the pound that's related to Brexit, and that does appear to be worrying quite a lot of people, quite a lot of voters. Really no regrets?
Well, I think the important thing now is, of course, as a government and as a member of the government as well, is to continue to, you know, give confidence in terms of what we're doing in government, but also through our economic policies, you know, the high levels of employment that we have, the strong fundamentals that we have in our economy as well, and that's our focus. But of course, let's look to the future. Yes, we are negotiating to leave the European Union, but at the same time, we're looking at our place in the world, standing tall in the world, looking at trade opportunities, trade preferences, which of course from a development perspective right now is a huge focus for me.
Well, I was a bit puzzled by, in fact, an announcement you've just made, which is that you would not make the terms of trade with poorer countries any worse after Brexit. But I thought the whole point was to make them better. So the status quo surely isn't much of an announcement.
Well, of course, they are asking about, you know, the future relationship that they will be having with us. And my focus, of course, within the international development world and the community that I work with is, yes, we are obviously saving lives and changing lives every day, but thinking to the future, looking at, you know, changing our aid relationship with many of the world's poorest to trading relations in the future. So countries such as Ethiopia, I was in Ethiopia last Friday.
But you didn't make any promises that actually it would be easier for them to trade with the UK. So what was the point of the announcement?
Well, the point of the announcement is to demonstrate that it's mutually beneficial to both countries, that obviously trade will continue, and it's important in terms of these are the poorest countries in the world that are already providing an enormous number of goods, whether it's tea, coffee, textiles, clothing, to British customers, to give certainty to them in terms of the market of selling and getting their products over here, but also in terms of keeping prices low, giving British customers and consumers and businesses the choices still open to them that they will want to have. But I think from a development perspective as well, it's ensuring that we do exactly what it says on the tin, which is helping those countries to trade their way out of poverty, using free and open markets in particular, to help them move from the aid dependency to become a strong country, standing on their own 2 feet, and of course becoming our even stronger trading partners of the future.
Now, the first part of the Brexit negotiations has been about the rights of EU citizens living here and British citizens living on the continent. The big gap between us and the rest of the EU is who will adjudicate when there are tensions about things like the pension rights or the health rights of people from the rest of the EU living here. And David Davis says it cannot be the European Court of Justice, it has to be British courts. Why does that matter? I mean, when there are people's lives and security at stake, why does it matter whether it's the European Court of Justice or British courts?
Well, it does matter, because the vote last year was to leave the European Union. And with that, of course, you know, it relates to leaving the European courts, because our courts here are strong enough and good enough to arbitrate over those rights of citizens in particular.
But it seems like a sort of point of theology that's simply going to make, you know, millions of people, both Britons and Europeans, just deeply uneasy.
Well, of course not, because the point of the negotiations that David Davis led on Monday last week was to put EU citizens and their rights on, you know, literally discuss them first and foremost as part of the early negotiations, which we are doing. The Prime Minister has been clear that she wants to safeguard and secure those rights, and that is the right thing to do. But also we have to look at the fact that we are leaving the European Union, and of course that means bringing back control of our laws and putting those powers in the hand of British courts, and that's effectively what we are seeking to do. But of course this is the start of the negotiation, and David and others in government of course will continue that negotiation, but importantly will secure the right outcome from the United Kingdom.
Now, the whole point of Theresa May's general election was to give her more control over the Brexit process. It's quite clear she's got less control than before the election of the Brexit process. So the general election was plainly a mistake.
Well, actually, I take the view that the referendum happened last year. The British public voted very clearly to leave the European Union. We should all also remember that during the election campaign, 80% of the public voted for parties that, you know, want to leave the European Union.
No, hang on a second. The House of Commons is much less under her control than it was. It was a mistake, wasn't it? Why wouldn't you just admit it was a mistake?
Absolutely not, because the reality is that we're leaving the European Union.
Well, you're a minority government, Priti. You had a majority.
This isn't about rewinding.
Hang on, you're trying to say black is white.
Decision. This is not about rewinding the process of the referendum last year.
One of the things that people don't like about politicians is when they don't tell the truth. Admit it, it was a mistake.
Well, I'm answering your question on the basis that we are leaving the European Union, and of course we are now.
But I asked you whether the election was a mistake.
Well, I don't think it was, because we are now in the position where we are leaving the European Union and beginning that negotiation process, which of course started last week. And the point to make here as well is that we've been clear from day one in terms of the negotiating objectives, which the Prime Minister outlined prior to the general election, and of course nothing has changed in terms of those objectives going forward.
Yeah, I've confiscated Priti Patel's passport, so she's still with me, but first, a few thoughts from Allegra.
Well, when on Friday Andrea Leadsom told the BBC's Emily Maitlis that the media, in asking probing questions about negotiations on Brexit, wasn't being patriotic enough, what did she mean? Well, we listened and we had a look out there. First of all, is this what she meant? This is Nigel Farage, a picture he tweeted on Friday, Brexit 1 year on. What an outfit. But our viewers, they also gave us some of their interpretations of what it meant. On Facebook, Vivian Brannan, some of these you can tell are different moods. So some are cynical, some are tongue-in-cheek, some are sincere. Here we have Vivian Brannan on Facebook. She Brexified her French champagne. Paul Beadle on Twitter, he tracked down this rather unusual-looking chicken tikka Yorkshire pudding for him embodying multiculturalism in the UK. Was this patriotic or disloyal? The Queen's outfit, which somebody must have pointed out to her, looked like the EU flag. There we are. Then more sincere. This is a note on a card at the Finsbury Mosque attack. And then this, remember this is that image, a lot of you shared it with us on Twitter, that image of the NHS being celebrated at the Olympic opening ceremony. But before I go back to you, Robert, Craig Oliver, David Cameron's head of communications, he has been in touch on Twitter, and it's a very, very interesting answer he sent in to us. He's saying hello, thanks for the shout out, and he is wanting to know, Priti, if you are going to be going for the Tory leadership, and also he thinks, though, perhaps he is not one of your backers, because he's wondering here, as a lot of people out there are doing, is it time for a new generation? Robert.
Well, I was indeed going to congratulate you on being named in the Sunday Telegraph as the next possible leader of the Tory party. How long do you think Theresa May is going to stay?
Well, look, I'm pretty clear that we are in government, getting on with the job of government, and actually, and really importantly right now, working with Theresa as Prime Minister to get on and do the job of leaving the European Union.
When I talk to your colleagues
Brexit
privately, I'm afraid none of them think she's going to be leader at the time of the next election. So, are you up for it? Are you going to put yourself forward?
Because the reality is, we're living in quite unprecedented times.
Really, you think she
right
could
now.
lead
well, we
the party
have to,
at the next
well,
election?
The reality is, and this is me speaking very frankly, I'm focused on getting on with the job that needs to be done right now. I think, as all government ministers are, there is a lot to do. We had the Queen's speech on Wednesday. There were 27 bills in that speech. 8 of them are
over 2 years.
8 of them are related to leaving the European Union. That's a lot of work, Robert, and that's a lot of focus in terms of all of us as a government to really be knuckling down and getting on with the job.
Are you putting yourself up to be the next leader?
Well, if you heard what I've just said, you'll clearly recognise that I'm talking about getting on and doing the job that not just myself, but other colleagues are involved in.
Now, why hasn't the DUP deal been done?
Well, from what I understand is, of course, with the DUP, the talks are ongoing and they are progressing in the right way as well. So, that deal will come to the conclusion at the right time.
Is it crucial to the survival of the government that the deal does get done?
Well, I think the reality is that, we'll have key votes coming forward in the next week on the Queen's speech, and we'll work with the DUP, obviously, to ensure that they give us that support. But I think going forward, this will be very much a deal where they will work with us on securing the best interests of our country.
Now, they share quite a lot of your values. You're opposed to gay marriage. Are you thrilled that the Tory party is doing a deal with the DUP?
Well, I take the view that we work with all parties that will support leaving the European Union and getting the right deal for the country right now. That has to be the right focus. The next 2 years will be everything will be based on, yes, leaving the European Union, but I think importantly as well, how Britain stands tall in the world. That is obviously about our place in the world, the way in which we transact, trade, our economy as well, in terms of growing our economy.
So just on all that, because of course it is so important, and just on all of that, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, says that the best way to get the best Brexit deal is to set up an all-party commission to help and advise the government on the way forward. What do you think of that idea?
Well, actually, I disagree with that on the basis that we're pretty clear the vote happened last year and we don't need to have a rerun of the arguments of remain and leave. This government is focused...
He's not saying that. I think he's talking about a commission that would advise on the technical detail to get us out.
Well, I think the technical details, in terms of how we leave, that work is in train already through David Davis, through his government department, working across the civil service, the whole of the civil service, and obviously our colleagues, yes, in Europe, but also with our ambassadors as well. But I think it's important to recognise, the Prime Minister herself has said this, is that irrespective of how people voted, our focus now is, yes, on leaving, but getting the right deal for our country. And that doesn't matter on how you voted last year in the referendum. This is about the best deal, making sure that we deliver the 12 objectives that she has outlined in terms of the Brexit negotiations. And of course, looking at Brexit and beyond Brexit as well, our place in the world, our economic prosperity options.
You've made that point several times, but obviously none of us can hear it too many times. Lovely to see you, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon. And I'm delighted that my two political chums are still here. And really what I wanted to pick up with you, Jacob and Angela, about was really, I think, two things that I was discussing with Priti Patel. One was this whole question of how long Theresa May has got as Prime Minister. What do you think, Angela?
Well, look, I think that the big elephant in the room with Priti's interview over there was the fact that Theresa May went to the country asking for a huge mandate, expecting a landslide victory, 20% ahead in the polls, and came back with a drubbing. She's lost her majority, she's lost her authority. She may be in power for now, but she's being tolerated by the Conservative Party. She has actually weakened the country's chances of getting a good deal by her huge miscalculation over the election and calling the election when she said she wouldn't.
Now, obviously, I'm going to pick up these points with Jacob in a minute, but I should point out, for those people who may not have noticed at home, that Labour did actually lose the election. You're not in power.
That's true, but we didn't win but it was Theresa May who lost. And she went to the country asking for a huge mandate to have a hard Brexit, and she didn't get it. She was actually humiliated. And
that is a problem, isn't it, Jacob, that her negotiating position was weakened by the election.
Well, I think all this is hugely overstated.
Is it?
Yes. Mrs.
Why?
May won the highest vote share of a Conservative
No,
Party. But this is really important because
why is it?
we get an exaggerated response to an election result that was not good for the Conservatives, but was not a disaster. The highest vote share since 1983, more votes than Tony Blair got in 1997. So,
but you don't have a majority in Parliament.
That's absolutely right. So I'm not.
But hold on. That's the reality of power.
Absolutely. I'm not beginning to pretend it was a good result or a success. I'm just trying to moderate the language, be a bit more reasonable about it.
I did point out to Angela that they hadn't won.
That's right. The Labour Party lost an election for the third time running. The Conservative Party's position went down a bit. Mrs. May remains the Prime Minister in the normal constitutional way. Assuming she commands a majority in the House of Commons, she has all the authority in all normal respects of any Prime Minister. Legislation may be more contentious, but all the executive powers of the Prime Minister rest with Mrs. May. And our European...
But the fundamental problem is related to Brexit. She went to the country trying to reinforce her negotiating position, and there is no question, Jacob, I mean, you know, you're not naive about this. The mood and the composition of the House has changed, and backbenchers will be more of a problem for her on Brexit.
I don't think that's right, actually, because the Article 50 bill has passed. And we have a lot to thank Gina Miller for, actually, because it is now in law that we leave the European Union by the end of March 2019. There is no majority in Parliament for repealing that law. If the laws proposed in the Queen's speech don't get through...
But hang on a second. But can I ask you a question about this? I mean, obviously, you would argue that we are leaving the EU, but for many people in your party, the way that we leave the EU really matters.
That's absolutely right. But what I'm saying...
I think we need a much more consensual Brexit now. I don't think that...
So you would agree with Justin Welby, would you, the idea of this commission?
I think that's an interesting idea.
What do you think?
No, I don't agree with His Grace. I think that it's rather a naive view, actually, that politics works, that the party of government makes decisions.
Well, look,
and the party of government, as long as it commands a majority in the House of Commons, is then accountable to the electorate.
We do not know what will happen with the Queen's speech next week, because Theresa May, before she went to the palace to reinstall herself as Prime Minister, said there was a deal with the DUP. That was a couple of weeks ago. It still hasn't been done.
What do you think has gone wrong with that deal,
the visit to the palace was a constitutional irrelevance. The Prime Minister does not, in our system, get reappointed after an election. The Prime Minister remains Prime Minister until she loses a vote of confidence in the House of Commons. Well, if the Queen's speech goes through, Prime Minister remains Prime Minister. But on the issue of the DUP, how important do you think a deal, a confidence and supply deal, a pact with the DUP is to the survival of Theresa May and the government? It depends on time frame. I think a deal with the DUP potentially means this Parliament could last 5 years. I wouldn't necessarily put money on that, but I think a deal with DUP makes that possible. I think without a deal with the DUP, a 5-year time would be unlikely, but I still expect that there would be a reasonable time frame without a formal deal.
And are you uncomfortable about the sums of money that the DUP appear to be asking for in terms of Northern Ireland investment as a condition? It looks like a bribe.
If you want some good news from a Conservative point of view from the election result, it was that it was very positive for the Union. Very good results in Scotland for Labour, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats with the pushing back of separatism there. But I think including Northern Ireland in ordinary UK politics is really important. A Northern Irish MP is just as valid an MP as one from Somerset, and I think we should remember that, and bringing Northern Ireland into the United Kingdom.
We're almost up to the break. Could I ask Jacob just one very, very quick question? Okay, we're useful to have a yes or no if possible, because we are almost out of time.
I'll do my best.
Do you think that Theresa May will be leading the Tory party at the time of the next election, whenever it is?
Yes.
You do genuinely think that?
I think she will, because there is no desire to have a change. And all this stuff in the Sunday papers is folderol.
Why is it there then, Jacob? It's been put there by the leadership contenders that are in the Tory party trying to knock off your current Prime Minister.
There are lots of ambitious people in all political parties who like to speculate about their chance. But let me tell you that lots of people, of course, have conversations about the disappointment of the election result and a feeling that this didn't go well, and a recognition that the person at the top has to take responsibility
Things
for
are
that.
changing. I think
I just need to complete, because the conversations then end by saying we've got to hold on to her, and that's what Conservative MPs are saying in the
Not what Conservative MPs are saying to me, but there we go.
Exactly.
We're obviously talking to different people.